Today on What the Lux, we're joined by Anthony Costa, a friend and leader whose career has helped define modern luxury hospitality. From the Burj Al Arab in Dubai, which is where we are now, I'm a bit jet lagged, was going to wear sunglasses like everyone else here, but that would be weird, to Mandarin Oriental's flagship in Hong Kong, Anthony has shaped experiences at some of the world's most iconic addresses. Currently, he's head of hospitality and lifestyle at Candy Capital, Nick Candy's very well-known and very prolific interior design and development management company. He's bringing his passion for true craft, timeless value, and emotional connection to a new frontier, blending world-class service with luxury living. Anthony, it's great to be here. It's great to have you. Thank you for joining.
Thank you for having me. It's great. And since you're a friend, you should call me Tony.
Tony.
Anthony is only for those guests that never knew me, so my staff could identify the good ones and the bad ones.
I just wanted to make sure that if a listener bumped into you, they'd address you by the correct formal.
It's okay.
Okay. All right, Tony. Let's go for it. So you've had this incredible career that spanned, there've been lots of different versions of Tony. Can you just talk to us about what led to your passion for hospitality and give us a bit of context to your career, because it's fascinating?
Yeah, I was blessed. My father was in hotels and I grew up in Glasgow, and he was a hotelier for this wonderful Scottish company called Stachys. And it was a Greek background. That's where the Greek heritage comes from. And I just grew up in hotels, so I knew everything about hotels and was at school, never planned to go into hotels at all. And sadly, when I was about 19, my father passed away. And you're thinking what to do. You want to be near to your mum. And I just got into hotels. Naturally, I knew the people in the company. I liked what I saw. I was always intrigued by, look at how they walk in. They're beautifully dressed. And why does this guy ask for a macchiato, but his milk on this side and just the foam? Everything was so unusual, but it was intriguing. And no day was the same. And there was always gossip. Right? I got to know all the people in the hotels, and I knew all the gossip. I knew everything that was going on, and I just liked it. And I thought, this was probably for me. And here we are some 30 odd years later.
Isn't it just funny, like in this world where we are increasingly isolated and we have to be really intentional about leaving the house to go and meet people because we have optimized how we engage with life to such an extent that we've stripped the serendipity out of things, and just the energy of walking out of your, bedroom door and into the fray of things, It's also energizing about going to places like India, which is where I come from.
Yeah.
You could never feel lonely in India.
No, but it's funny. I was sitting having lunch, and my brother lives in Dubai the other day, and we were talking about, my life, when I grew up. I don't think my parents knew where I was at night until 9 o'clock. If you went home by 9 o'clock, it was getting dark. Maybe they would send somebody out, just where are they? Right? To today, nobody wants to send their children into the street to play football or put the jumpers down in the park or, and have the goalposts. Life's just different. And people are glued to their phones and their iPads, and it's just a different way.
When I was growing up, I was really passionate about a series of books called Just William.
Oh, yes.
I think most people sort of my age or above probably had read them. And it was, I guess, like the famous five about, adventures in the countryside and through the the woodlands in Britain. And I just became really, as a sort of 10-year-old, obsessed with this idea of kind of being lost in the woods. And I got really into mountain biking, and we moved, fortunately, to an area where there was a sort of forest nearby. And, I sort of would go off with my dog and my bike and just spend entire days, at the age of, I was probably sort of 10 maximum, maybe even younger. I can't remember. Some people are great at remembering the exact year when everything in their life happened. I couldn't tell you the foggiest. I couldn't tell you when I graduated. But, I know it's just a beautiful thing, to just have autonomy at that age. It's so special at that age to have autonomy and to be able to explore and do so with the innocence that is only afforded to you at that age, to have your first impression of things.
Yeah, it's quite interesting you say that, because I think we were similar where we grew up. But I always thought my parents just trusted me. They knew when you went out in the morning, and they trusted you to be home when you needed to be home. And everybody else's parents trusted each other as well. And then you were with your friends all day, and you all looked out for each other. You all had a laugh together. Some of you read books, some of you were good at sports, some of you just sat and talked. A couple of guys would have a cigarette when they were 14 or 15, and you didn't touch it because it wasn't for you. It was just a different generation.
Do you think hospitality's become more highly strung as a result of this sort of change in sort of energy dynamic?
Well, I think if I look back, and it's an interesting opening, when it was my father's generation, I think they were more innkeepers, they were hosts. They understood the business acumen to a degree, but there was never the focus. There wasn't KPIs. It was about the guest. And if you looked after the guests, everything was taken care of. Today, I think everybody is focused on the Monday morning call or the email or your KPIs. How are you doing? Where's your benchmarking? What's TripAdvisor saying? It's not easy.
Well, it's, we've become so kind of guest-centric, customer-centric, to the point where the bottom 10% of TripAdvisor reviews apparently go bankrupt. I mean, I suppose for good reason, but perhaps, there are some appalling propositions. Maybe they deserve not to be around, but it is unfortunate how perhaps a bad string of interactions can result in doom. And it has perhaps created an environment that is relentless for staff, and the culture that you have to create to always appease, difficult customers, and for that to take precedence over, what you said earlier, like hosting. And Matteo Atti, who's the CMO of VistaJet, on a previous episode, cited great hospitality as knowing your host, which is just a very simple way that I thought was really nice, kind of forgotten mantra, know your host.
Well, when it comes down to you've got a KPI-focused business, if you're in hospitality, restaurant, whatever you want to call it, then you're taking somebody away from being with the customer, being with the people and guiding them, I used to go home and do my schoolwork in the lobby of my dad's hotel and I'd watch him having a beer and talking to customers, getting up, helping somebody with their luggage to the elevator. And because he was doing that, everybody was doing that. Right.
There's a lot to be said about that, isn't there? About, displaying habits and characteristics and behaviors that set the culture, because people will always emulate what the leader does. You can say things to your blue in the face, but if you act differently, no one will follow you. And that actually goes for things like disconnecting when you're on holiday. You can say, oh yeah, it's very important, we must disconnect when we're on holiday. But if you're there with a sort of email addiction, picking up on every nuance when you're away as a leader, I think that sets a bad tone as well.
Yeah, you've got to, I think what you've got to learn at some stage in your career is to trust everybody around you. You've hired great people. And if you can't go for 10 days, 5 days, 2 weeks and let the business get on, right, without being on your phone 24/7, there's a problem. There was a great book years ago called Sleeping with Your BlackBerry or something like that. And it was about Volkswagen and Mercedes trying to instill a corporate culture of not doing emails after certain times and everything. Didn't quite work for them because of global time frames. But I loved the idea. And I thought, well, I could do that with my team. I'm open. I can say, I'm not going to send you an email after 8 o'clock at night unless it's a guest-focused one that there's a guest in the hotel and they need something or they're having a problem. And then I need a reply. Other than that, I don't need to send you anything before 8 in the morning and after 8 at night, because if I do, I'm taking you away from your time.
Yeah.
So you try. Doesn't always work.
Yeah, I half agree with that. I remember in COVID, Portugal tried to implement a rule that made it illegal to send emails as a boss to staff after working hours, which I thought was very odd for a company that was also trying to promote a global nomad visa. because I feel like one almost reinforces the 9 to 5 indirectly. Really, we should be creating a culture where people have a sense of what is urgent and what is important, and knowing it's okay to not, have to respond to things, rather than stopping people writing things or sending them when it might suit their own rhythm. I say this as a nighttime person.
We could debate this one forever, because there's just the individual who has to reply to all. Yeah, and then that starts the reply to all chain. And before you know it, it's 11 o'clock at night. There's 20 emails on something that's really quite simple that could have waited till the morning. So there's never a right and a wrong, but if you're as a leader, I think, and you try your best to teach people to send what's important only and reply to what's required in those out of office times or out of work times or the weekend, whatever it might be, then at least you're trying. At least you're getting there.
I mean, let's move on this. This. I promise I will, but I just can't help but pick up on the reply all comment, because I couldn't agree more. The cost of pressing reply all, which we're all guilty of, is so high. You know, you forget how many minutes and cognitive processing that requires, and the sense that people ought to reply or add some value to a chain every time you press reply all, rather than being considerate about the people who are copied. It's just extraordinary how easy it is to basically kill other people's time.
I think this is an episode by itself.
It is an episode by itself. But it does sort of segue into a question that I wanted to ask you about leadership. You've held many leadership roles, and I think it's a very unique form of leadership, what you have to do in the roles that you've had. You know, you have to be in the boardroom, but you also have to inspire staff on the front line. You're a bridge to those things. You also have to do it in a variety of different cultures, where there are different contexts and there are different considerations that you have to play into. You know, how has that changed? How has that exposure changed your own belief about what success is?
So look, when I was young, you know, I sometimes I'm ashamed to reflect upon it.
You still seem incredibly young to me.
Yeah, well, I wish. I think, you know, when you're young, you're dynamic, you want to get up that ladder. And sometimes you burn people because that's the success route. And then, like a good bottle of wine, you age a little bit better, you mature, and you start to reflect and see things. And maybe I was lucky as well that, you know, parenthood and different cultures, going to different places, allowed me to have to think carefully about how I approached my leadership. And an interesting one maybe was when I was in Japan. And I used to do these town halls. They were great. 600 people in the room. You'd come with a translator. You'd have your whole team with you. You'd be presenting. And they would be the Japanese would be really receptive to this. But I could never understand why there was a dozen or maybe 24 of them with their eyes closed as if they were sleeping. And I remember grabbing the team, the leadership team after the meeting, saying, look, we've got to do something. There's this one sleeping, and this one's sleeping, and this one's sleeping. And Yuka, my secretary, turned around and she said, boss, here in Japan, the culture typically is that they close their eyes because they're blanking everything around them out. And they are the ones that are most probably absorbing more than anybody, right, the information you're disseminating. So I felt like an idiot because the ones who I thought were least engaged were actually the most engaged. And they listened, they took it all in. They didn't want anything to disturb their brain. And it was fascinating. And as you go from one culture to another, I think you got to prepare yourself in advance a little bit, understand the questions, ask, don't assume, take your time before you think about it.
That's really fascinating. Can you talk through the different roles you've had and how that has shaped your perspective on business and leadership? Because you've had many varied roles that have brought you to Candy Capital today, and I'm interested to hear about them.
So I think there's a couple of things. I've had roles and I've had bosses, leaders. And I think you gravitate to your leader, you watch the industry. So quite early on in the industry, I realized I wanted to work for Four Seasons. There was a wonderful man called John Young. He was he was the head of human resources. And every year I used to write to Mr. Young, dear Mr. Young, please find attached my resume. You know, with all the passion I could put into that letter. And every year I'd get a reply saying, thanks very much. And then
it's great you replied.
Yeah, I got a reply. Yeah. And I kept all these replies. And I went off and, you know, I joined SAS, International Hotels. And president was Mr. Ritter, charismatic guy. And he said, follow your dream. But in between following that dream, do as well as you can do. Right? And SAS was a very open leadership. You know, you could phone Mr. Ritter up at any time. You could call anybody in the company. It was 32 people in the corporate office. So everybody was engaged. Everybody was there for each other. And ownership never bothered you in those days as much as maybe today. You know, the owners are much more involved. And I just kept writing every year to John Young. And then I met a wonderful lady that our industry knows her very well called Mary Gostolo in Helsinki. And she said, Tony, why are you working for SAS here in Helsinki? So I just joked and said, because John Young doesn't give me a job in 4 seasons. So I came to the office on the Monday morning, never forget it, ever. And I opened up my email, and there it was, an email from Wolf Hengst, president and CEO of 4 Seasons, saying, can you contact me? And that started this journey with 4 Seasons. And in 4 Seasons, what a remarkable company that Mr. Sharp had built, the culture, the people, the processes, the intuition towards the customer service. And I worked for a great guy called John Brennan, who just allowed me to be me, but understand what 4 Seasons was and how they deliver to luxury. But 4 Seasons was a bottleneck. You couldn't really get easily promoted. There was just opportunities passing by, and I was lucky. I got to work for a man called Edward Ettige at Mandarin Oriental. And maybe that individual understood me a little bit more than others, that I thought I was highly creative. Thought I was disruptive, had a bit of an ego at that time. I knew I could do things. And he took me to Hong Kong, gave me an opportunity in Hong Kong, and I was at the landmark Mandarin Oriental, which had just been opened. And the lady who had opened it was a lady called Suzanne Hatcher, a marvellous hotelier, like a true hotelier. And she'd opened it really well, and she had moved to America. And all the bones and everything were there, and it was just a matter of how do you put the vision of taking the landmark Mandarin Oriental and ensuring it was not perceived to be the Mandarin Oriental, which was 1,000 meters across the road, right? Which was not an easy thing to do, because everybody expected the sophistication and the culture of the Mandarin, but this was a totally different proposition. It was 100 keys. It was very boutique. It's a younger generation you were trying to pull in. And we did all sorts of great things there. We were very innovative, and people allowed me to be that way. And then I got off to Tokyo. I kept saying, no, I don't want to move. I want to challenge myself. I want to go to Japan. I want to see if I can be a stronger leader. And did some business school in between, went to INSEAD. And, you know, the Japanese culture is so far away from everybody else. Right? We talk about the closing the eyes. When you sit with a Japanese person, very often they make a noise when they're listening to you. That's just to make sure you know they're listening. Right? So everything's engaged. You're focused on what they want. They communicate everything. They record everything and manually in those days. And it was just an amazing place to learn about people. Hospitality was very gracious there, is in Asia anyway, is in 4 Seasons. That DNA is similar wherever you go. So you're taking it, twisting it, tweaking it.
Yeah.
Challenging it a little, because I think it's okay to be a little bit disruptive, right? It's okay to push the envelope out. And I loved working for Edward and his leadership team, because they supported that disruptiveness, that, I work for a company, but I'm going to go and do this anyway. And I did a couple of great events that, had I asked, I did one specific event with my team in Tokyo, and if I had asked to do it, I was probably being told no. So I didn't ask to do it. I only told one lady, who was a lady called Jill Kluge, the PR lady of Mandarin Oriental, head of communications. Sorry, Jill, if you're listening. And I had agreed to bring Noma, the restaurant from Copenhagen, the world's best restaurant, to Tokyo for 5 or 6 weeks, and close Noma down and bring all the staff. This was way above your pay grade, your authorization in many ways. But it would reset the hotel. It would reposition the Mandarin Oriental Tokyo. Just after the tsunami, Tokyo was just getting back on its feet. So I said, Jill, look, I'm going to do this, but don't tell anybody, please. And you'll have to guide me when to tell Edward. So I swore 3 people in my team to secrecy. The Noma guys didn't tell anybody. And then the day before the press release, I get a call from Edward, I was in New York to do the press event. Hello, Tony. Do you want to tell me something? So I told him, and I explained to him why I didn't go through the channels, and he loved it. He loved it, and became such an event. It was an education for the Japanese team to see the intensity of Rene and his team. It was people making friendships that were lasting. They were there for, some of them were there for 4 or 5 months. But it was just an amazing event. It was something the Japanese customers just loved. People came from all around the world. And yeah, we made a lot of money from it. But it just was a great event. And I was lucky that I worked for Edward.
Just to satiate my own curiosity, can you just talk more to the Japanese business style? Because you spent time there and you get a very intimate understanding of things when you work in the world of hospitality. Hospitality is sort of ambassadorship for culture. And so can you just speak to, I'm just so interested now you've sort of touched on it a little bit, the differences of working in Japan and the things that struck you and stayed with you.
So I think in Japan, the first thing is the level of respect everybody gives each other, right? From the chairman of the owning company all the way down his leadership, they give you respect, you give them respect. Everybody works as one. They work together to get something done. The Japanese typically demand an association in everything. They work together to make a decision. I wasn't like that. I was a little bit, okay, I'm going to see this. I see this vision. I see this gap in the market. I see an opportunity. Talk to many people about it. I just need to get it done. But in Japan, if you're going to bring in the people around you, you need to bring them in and talk to them and lead them. They want you to be energetic. They want you to be sure, Anant, that what you're going to do is going to be successful. So, they challenge you to make sure your communication is spot on, that your research, why you want to do something, is thought through carefully. Now, you say these two. Now, is it going to work? Is it going to be successful? Because they don't want to do something, change something because it's going to fail. Mm. And at all levels, from the highest level to the lowest level, they're part of this journey. And I found it really interesting because I don't know if you've been to Tokyo.
I have.
To help you understand how a process worked, I was in the car one day and I was driving past something. It was a Sunday afternoon, just been golfing. And I saw this flame in a window and I thought, oh, what's that? So I said to the driver, I said, could you stop? Stopped, went into this little restaurant. I said, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you doing? And the man was touching this dough as if it was a newborn baby. I mean, his hands, the way he just touched it, he was throwing these wooden chips into this open pizza fire. And it was done with style and flair and he had a temperature gauge to see what the flame was. And then he was putting the dough inside. And I just watched them and this lady came and I said, what are you doing? And I said, what is this? She said, it's a pizzeria. So I asked all about it and they explained A to Z with such pride, like an attention on everything. So I called my management team on a Sunday. I said, I don't care where you are. Sorry to your families. Get yourselves here now. Sent the pin. 6 months later at Mandarin Oriental Tokyo, we decided to open an 8-seat pizza bar. Pizza on 38th, it's called. And I think it's one of the most successful pizza operations globally in the world. It's certainly recognised. Same chef, Daniele Casson, we brought him over from Italy with his mother's recipes, with his recipes. And we stuck to our guns. It was going to be very Japanese in structure, not many offerings, a little twist here and there. So specific on the pizza cutter. We got it from a wonderful Japanese swordsman who made it. Everything was done in great detail.
That's incredible.
And it was done for $49,990 because I wasn't allowed to spend more than $50,000 without getting approval. But I was telling the owners about it, and you disseminated this to everybody, and you got everybody's buy-in. Mm. And then I went to the media. And the media decided, a little guy called Suzuki-san, he was the editor of GQ magazine, and he dressed in Tom Brown with brogues and shorts, a bit like Just William.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
need to go back, right? If you think about it. And he came and he called this decadent luxury. And this went all over Japan, that you had to go to the pizza bar on 38th and drink Krug champagne with a pizza. And from that day, the bar's been full ever since.
I mean, that Mandarin is also, it's a special place.
But, again, I go back, Christian Hassing, who set it up, he opened it, Christian and his team. I was lucky. I took over hotels that were well structured, well brought up, and I could just put my creativity hat on.
Yeah, what a great job.
And that's what I love doing. I could be that creative catalyst for people. And you talked about inspiration. I think that's what inspired the staff, the colleagues.
So you've obviously, you had, what did you do after that? Because it sounded like Tokyo was an immersive experience for you, and sounded like it shaped aspects of your leadership style as well.
It was a plus and a bad moment. I got asked to go back and run the flagship Mandarin Oriental Hong Kong.
Right.
And, I think at that time they wanted to renovate it and reposition it again. The Rosewood was opening, the Peninsula was being renovated, the St. Regis was going to open. There's a lot happening in Hong Kong. But I sort of went back. I was asked to go back by Edward, and then he left the company, he retired. And it was a change of guard and maybe an apprehension about renovating and spending too much money. And that's where I was good, I think. That's where I brought a value that some could and some couldn't.
Transformation.
I think I had that vision. And we worked on it. We did look at things, but I just felt it was getting a bit slow for me. And I wanted to challenge myself a little bit. And I felt that being at the Mandarin Hong Kong, if it was going to stay the same, I wasn't the right person for that role.
Yeah.
And I think it was wrong to cheat everybody that, well, you're going to be there, do it. You'll do it well, but you're going to cheat yourself because you're not pushing yourself to be you. And I thought, okay, let's move on. Let's find something a little bit different to challenge yourself. And I was fortunate. I knew the president of Wynn. I went over to Macau, and I mean, I use this expression that you were sort of the king of the castle at the Mandarin Hong Kong, and you were a prince in a little palace in Wynn Palace in Macau. You were a nobody.
Yeah.
These leaders were really amazing people. They had 10,000 staff, and it was a business generating $1.5 billion EBITDA. It was a different planet you were on. It was actually the same process. You just needed to win respect and gain respect of the peers around you, and make sure that you could communicate, you could innovate, you could drive quality. Mr. Wynn was all about quality, all about service. He felt that if you could do it in the Mandarin Hong Kong, you could do it in Wynn Palace with 1,800 rooms. And we had great people. I mean, the senior team at Wynn Palace were just unbelievable. They were relentless, but relentless with fun. We had good laughs, and I think that was interesting. But I didn't want to be in Macau long.
What was it like?
Like it was fascinating. It was this island next to Hong Kong, full of casinos.
Yeah.
95% of the population was Chinese speaking. Just wasn't for me. I tell you where I struggled. I did not struggle in the job. I loved being at work.
Yeah.
The problem was, outside of work, I'm actually quite introverted. I like my own space, and I just didn't click into Macau.
Yeah.
In work, I felt super. I really enjoyed it, but I just didn't enjoy Macau. I don't know. I just wasn't for me. So I struggled a little bit, and I had the opportunity to move to Dubai and take on the Burj Al Arab, which was meant to be at that time renovated. And a lot of changes in Jumeirah at that time. It didn't get renovated. Stayed there for 2.5 years till sort of COVID came in, and then moved for the same owning company, Dubai Holding, to what was then Caesar's Palace. I'd worked with the casino people. I think there was a blend, and I had a great fun. I have to admit that Amit Kashal, the CEO of Dubai Holding, I think he just knew that I'd be the right fit for him, and Caesars and everybody would fit together. That's where I go back about working for your boss. It's so important. If you work for a boss that you enjoy, you just love it. You do things that you wouldn't normally have done, and you're bold. And we did 3 years at Caesar's Palace, and it was tremendous. I really enjoyed it. But when I did that transition, I sort of knew in the year of the transition, I don't know if I wanted to be on the marble and wait at 7 a.m. anymore and shake hands, or be there at midnight and say goodbye. Or I'd started to feel, well, 30 years of doing this is enough, maybe. And I'd known Nick Candy for a long time. And look, Nick is a great entrepreneur. He doesn't stop. He doesn't stop pushing his team. He's got an amazing group of executives, small niche. They're all great at what they do, and we all respect each other, and we all bring different competencies to the table. But I just like Nick's sort of gung-ho attitude, and he's got this great project in Dubai, which we can't quite talk about yet, but hopefully soon. And he's got some other things in the pipeline, and it's where he starts planting the seed, and he nurtures it a little bit, and he keeps pushing the team to put more water on it. And all of a sudden you get this really interesting concept coming out, or with another party, a joint venture. And you learn about development, you learn about investment, you learn about the land price, the development costs, things that I'd never really been exposed to before. And I find it fascinating. I find myself going on and doing these online courses sometimes. They might only be an hour or 2 hours on development, project development, construction. Super interesting.
What can you bring the Candy Capital business to life, and the sorts of projects that, the business has been built on?
Well, Nick's looking at residential components, but with hospitality. So he's a great believer on, One Hyde Park, as an example, is perfect next to the Mandarin, Mandarin Oriental. And it's a really interesting, where he believes that you need a hotel, a branded hotel, a great luxury hotel with a great operator next to your residences to deliver all the services and interactions that you need. So we've got something great to announce in Dubai and some other places. And I suppose what I bring is I can say, well, look, what about this operator?
Yeah.
What about this operator? What about these restaurants? What about if you do retail, lifestyle, hospitality? So if you've got extra areas where you're putting in restaurants, well, what are the restaurants that we should be looking at for the future? And, to go back, you're building a destination, so you need to have something for everybody. And you need to be mindful. And you need to be mindful that wealthy people also look at how much they spend. You can't just put everything expensive just because they're there. So I'm really learning how to create. I'm going around the world. I saw the new Printemps in New York, and it's got some great components that I thought, wow, that's interesting. You still look at Harrods in London, because it's Harrods in London. You think, when you just love to have, the chocolate shop from Harrods, because I think the whole of Dubai would go there to buy stuff. So I think it's all about the curation. Obviously, there's some names you want to bring who are the best florist maybe in the world, or whatever. You still want to bring intrigue and excitement to it. But it's also the architecture. What's the architecture going to be? What's the design going to be? I've never been involved in this before, from scratch. And the ability to work with great designers, Elaine and Nick's team, and the people we're working with, it's just fascinating. And talking about, well, should a restaurant be 500 square meters, or should it be 1,000 square meters, or should it be 300 square meters? And what works in Dubai, but what works in New York, works in London. Fascinating.
One of the things we like to focus on in this podcast is just the changing notion of value. I find it fascinating. Why do we value certain things? Why do we not value other things as much? And, in this age of instant everything, what still makes luxury feel valuable?
It's such an interesting question, because I think so many people will answer this in a varied way. For me, I look at craftsmanship. I look at time. I sit back and I ask myself, this watch is beautiful. Right, it's a nice watch. It tells the time. I've got another watch that has a story to it. And that story to me is much more valuable. There's a story behind the maker, the person who put it together, the design, the enamel on the face. So I sort of look at the story more than I look at anything else. to understand what's the story that creates that value.
It's funny, isn't it? Because story is clearly so important. And when one talks about it conceptually, it's easy to forget how different and rich every story is. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
The word itself can often just sort of mask the uniqueness of every story and the meaning that it imbues, any product or service.
You look at some of the most luxurious brands, how they started. It's the story, isn't it? About the saddle for Hermes, the travel trunk with Goyard. It's the story. And I think, I was always fascinated with the story. I was fascinated with, be it Baccarat Crystal and their story, and Madame Taittinger and the family. And, I was fascinated by Lang & Sony watches where the craftsman makes it 3 times. The Patek guy doesn't, and that's not. The value of a Lang & Sony watch versus a Patek is different, but the story behind that person making it 3 times, taking it apart 3 times, wherever we go.
But isn't it funny how in this age of abundance, story is the thing that is left that is truly valuable? Yes. We're wired for the campfire. And I mean, look at the size of the entertainment industry. It's easy to forget that, most of the things we do are because of story.
Yes.
And we actualize through story and we connect with each other through story. I find it really, really interesting, like how basic we are in many ways. Yeah, how important that component is.
Totally agree.
Do you think the idea of value has shifted over the last decade?
Yeah, incredibly. I think it's moving from being, the bling, I need to have it, to, I really want to have something that means something.
Do you think that's changed in places like Dubai, which have been associated with ostentatious displays of wealth?
Yeah, it's still there though.
Yeah.
Right, look at the car parks.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
It's still there. But I think there's a lot of, as Dubai grows, the people who are coming into it, they also bring an education, because there's a lot of wealthy people relocating here. And they start to discuss the painting, the value in certain things. And, maybe what was important when they were 30 years of age, the bling car that they had when they were in New York, LA, London, whatever, they don't need here. They've got other things that they represent. And as that surrounds itself with other people and they start to know each other, they go, oh, maybe I should be focusing on that now.
Dubai is an innovative place, and value comes from story and that sort of spirit and that thing that you use to imbue meaning into a product or service. How do you balance innovation while maintaining timelessness? And maybe let's go back to life at sort of the Mandarin, for example, where this is a tension that you no doubt had to navigate. How do you tread that tightrope?
So the Mandarin Hong Kong is an interesting one, because here you are with this historic building. And I don't know how well you know that hotel. They renovated it in 2000. Well. They renovated it in 2006. And the first thing everybody said is the lobby's the same. And the lobby was the same. It was the exact same marble. They spent all this new money on putting the new marble in, and they just copied it and put it back in. And people were sort of surprised. And I think at that time was probably 50% of the company or whatever was like, let's not change it. And 50% of the company were change it. And it's a real cocktail, because the consumer can push you too hard to change. Oh, we want to see. But when it's history, when it's heritage, you got to keep that, because you've got beautiful DNA and culture with the staff. You've got a wonderful sophistication that's already there. When you try to push it too far, it's difficult. So to me, when I was there, I always felt it was, bring a little bit of today and then tomorrow in, and hope that it fits everything else. And I go back to that time in 2006. I think the team who were at Mandarin Hong Kong did a great thing. They brought Terence Conran to redo the Mandarin Grill. And he did it beautifully. And nobody said a thing. Everybody was like, wow, this is beautiful. And they brought a designer. She did the Mandarin Barber. And she made it this, so beautiful little jewel box. And it's just paying the respect to the heritage. And I think every manager before me and every manager after me, they just find that cocktail, and it's like a great glass of wine, bottle of wine. It matures, and then sometimes you put a little twist on a cocktail and you bring it in, and people really like it. And occasionally it's a bit bitter for them, and it goes away quickly.
Let's put that aside and ask you about innovation and innovations that you find interesting today.
Look, I like seeing the innovation and sustainability in hotels. I think it's getting interesting, right? I can see how it's starting to come more and more in. Where it will go, I don't know, but I'm watching it carefully. I like that. I'm looking at AI and asking myself, how's that going to impact the hotel industry? Right. I don't know who I read today or yesterday, they've cut 40 concierges now because AI can do that job. I don't believe that. I don't believe that those concierges around the world who can get me that table or get me that book or that, whatever it is, can be replaced by AI. So I think we've got to be careful, but I like a lot of it. I like how you can go onto this app, Martin. I don't know if you know it. It's like having your own secretary.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's interesting because if it helps me become more efficient and gives me my time, allows me to have better quality of time, or people around me, better quality of time, I'm intrigued about it. So those are things that I'm interested in.
There are a lot of applications of AI in the back office that are less publicly celebrated because they're more boring. Companies like Winnow, for example, that actually has helped big hotel chains like Iberostar reduce waste by actually filming what gets thrown away and then, analysing how fridges should be stocked the next day or how menus should be altered, which I find that side of things pretty fascinating, the invisible impact of AI.
Yeah. And I think it's about, again, sharing what's successful, how that's shared, I'd love to see the younger managers in my industry participating in it more, working with it more, being part of working groups, development, to see. You need them to grasp it. You need them to embrace it. You need them to see the value of it for it to start rolling out. And
then your job, I think, as a leader is to remind them what the actual questions you're trying to answer are, what the actual problems you're trying to solve, and apply, the wisdom born of leadership, born of our years in leadership, to just remind people that technology for technology's sake, or anything for anything's sake, means nothing unless it answers some fundamental human need or desire. Yeah. Tony, how do you translate a brand's cultural identity into a sort of real lived guest experience at scale? Because that's something that it's always fascinated me. Like, how do you take something and then operationalize it?
Yeah, I don't think people really understand how complex opening the door every day. Well, you don't really close the door of a hotel, but opening up every day and starting again, how demanding, how many components, how many cogs are going around and to get that wheel moving. It's a lot of people, and it's a lot of people being dedicated, being meticulous, being seamless in the way you put things together. It's just not an easy morning at all.
What's a day in the life?
What's the day in the life of a
when you're running a hotel?
It's tough.
What you're up at, you're basically like
You're up early, you're in the hotel. I think most GMs are in the hotel no later than 8 o'clock in the morning. They're there 8 o'clock at night. You've been the week before looking at who's arriving next week. What do they like? What do they not like? What flight are they on, right? When are they arriving? That amenity that goes in your bedroom when you arrive, it isn't just all plucked out of the air. It's, well, he's arriving at 11 o'clock at night. Maybe he's not had dinner. Let's put a nice tea in. Let's not put too much chocolate in. Let's put some tea and something soft in. It's monumental. Then it's somebody's birthday, it's the child's birthday, or it's his wife's birthday, or it's the husband's 60th birthday. You're always trying to make sure there's the little touches that people know they're recognised, because that's what people love. They love recognition.
Tony, what would you change about your industry if you could change one thing?
I must probably get shot now, right? I don't know who's going to listen to this. Look, I get a bit disillusioned with the word 5-star. I feel that everybody wants to say they're 5-star, but who are the true 5 stars? Now, I think Forbes try and put it there, right? I think they try. But, I think if you really were to go around as a consumer, if you were going to be transparent as a company like Forbes or ratings and say, well, look, my coffee needs to be here in 12 minutes. I think a lot of the people that have 5 stars today that would not have 5 stars if that coffee wasn't there in 12 minutes, right? I'd like to see the bar being raised. I'd like to reset the 5 star and what is a 5 star in terms of service, in terms of product, in terms of experience, in terms of sustainability. I'd like to see it really challenged. And I think 5 stars should become a little bit more elite, or maybe it's something above. And I'm sure there's a whole load of owners of companies and hotels that are going to not like that and say I'm an idiot. Maybe I am. But I think the bar needs to be reset.
There are some terrible 5-star hotels, and one would hope that you would go somewhere where design is valued. I mean, that's the thing that it's different for everyone. But to go places that are 5-star because they tick the box and amenities, but are poorly developed and designed, depresses me.
So for the listeners, Anant said that, not me, but yeah, you're right. That's where I'm coming from. That I think there's a whole catalogue that could be revisited and reset. And the word luxury, we're a luxury this, we're a luxury that, and it's just overused.
What most concerns you about the world we're leaving the kids?
I ask myself, are we good house guests of this planet? I don't know if that's the right way of putting it to across to people, but I'm not the best myself when it comes to looking after the planet. But the more I start to spend my own time and the more start to read and the more start to observe about it, I don't think we're great house guests. And ultimately, what we're going to be leaving this next generation may be that they're going to be the best fixer-uppers ever, if they can fix it. Or it's just going to be one big mess. But I hope we can just respect the planet a bit more. I do get concerned about the screen time that children go on. Isn't it? You're a father. You've got 2 young children. I think it's really terrible that I go to restaurants and it's that one child out of the 17 that I look at that's not on an iPad or an iPhone during dinner. Yeah. He's actually at the table, quite happy being at the table with mum, dad, aunt, gran, whatever. And I'm looking going, oh, look, that's great.
Yeah. Just to reinforce that point, because it's a unique insight of people who have kids of this age right now. But, we've been looking for primary schools that don't use screens, don't use iPads in classroom. And it very, very much limits your search. They're like sort of Steiner schools and the occasional Montessori. And there are really not many options. And in Dubai, I know for a fact there are almost no options, and same in the US. So it's very, very tough because obviously there's a advantage offered by technology that removes friction and widens the aperture that you have on things. But there's a terrible bit of collateral damage to that, psychological collateral damage, that I think is kind of irredeemable in some ways. I mean, it's each to their own for this stuff, but I agree with you, which is presence is so important. And I say that as someone who battles with it as well. I'm not like sitting here like a yogi.
Look, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go, but I hope we can find the way that we can get children to want to pick up a book or go and play in the forest and pretend you're a soldier or whatever you were, or camp out, rather than all be about screens. And when you're out in that forest, that you appreciate that greenery and that air and that tranquility and just the people around you. I hope we can get there. I hope we can tidy it up. I hope we can make it great. I hope we can stop the plastic being in the sea and the ocean, tenfold to where we are today.
And then Tony and Nick Candy, don't shoot me for asking this question. My turn to make that appeal. But if you did have to give up your job tomorrow, obviously, you have an incredible job, so I'm sure you wouldn't be doing that. But what would you do? And I'm talking total industry career change, not just a brand that you admire.
Yeah, I don't know if I could. I don't know if I would just dump my industry. You know, I've always wanted to.
If you had to.
If I had to. Well, suppose let's drift it a little bit. One, I would maybe want to have my own little luxury boutique bed and breakfasty hotel-y type thing in the Greek islands, right? Which is still part of it. I'd love to mentor people as in have a company, an app for mentoring people in retail hospitality on service, on behavior, or also the brand boardrooms where I think they maybe have an opportunity.
Let's build it, Tony. Next venture.
We should, right?
Let's do it.
And then if I was just going to go and do something else, I think I'd love to give myself a shot at being a writer. I think I've enjoyed all the experiences that I've ever had in my working life and childhood. I'm blessed. I've worked with great people. I've seen wonderful things, been part of wonderful teams. I would maybe like to put that into some sort of writing at some stage.
Well, given your voracious reading habit, your eloquence and your anecdotes, I'm sure that would be an easy path to pursue.
No, when you go to put the pen on the paper, I've got a little book that I've been trying to finish. I'm only like chapter 6, right? And there's times I just can't write. I don't know. It's not writer's block. It's just how do I put it across consistently in 280 pages consistently? It's much more difficult than you think.
Yeah, I'm in that journey right now. Tony, what's the most exciting thing for you in the next 5 years?
Oh, the most exciting in work or outside of work?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter. Look, what we're doing at Candy Capital, I think, is super exciting. So I think to be part of that evolution, that journey, that build up with the people involved in all of the projects is really quite interesting. It's fascinating. I love it, right? At the same time, I think what's fascinating is, and I think you're much better at this. You've discovered it earlier than I have. I've sort of started discovering what it's like to enjoy me time or be joyous with other people and savor those moments more. I think when I worked in the hotel, the way my days were, as we talked about before, even your weekend, your holiday, whatever, I don't think I really savored my private time in my life with other people, and a lunch with my brother, or the golf that I'm playing, or those special moments and memories. I think then as the next 5 years evolve, I'm going to get much better at that, and I'm going to embrace it more, and I'm going to master it more. And it's like I just told you, I read that book, the Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. I'm not saying I'm going to do that with everything I'm going to do, but that book's inspired me on certain things. And I'm starting to look at it and saying, how do I just live a joyous, happy life with those around me? And I'm not saying we're dancing around the flagpole, but just how do I appreciate things? How do I appreciate nature? How do I appreciate that I live most probably 1 kilometre from a beach, right? And do I go to that beach very often? Most probably not enough. And just stand with my feet in the sand and the water. That's what I really want to start doing.
I think that's a lovely image, Tony, to end on. Tony with his feet in the water.
I hope so.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much
for your time. It's
Pleasure.
Been a real joy.
Pleasure. Thank you.